Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You've done this before. You must have thought about it.
Look at me. You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You're coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear. Let that protect you.
Thank you.
Well, hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome to Road to Rebellion, the Andor Aftershow. I'm one of your hosts, Pete Fletzer.
And I am Nick Mielke. Thank you for hanging out with us here on Around the Galaxy, part of the SSW network.
We are fired up because Andor Season 2 is finally here, and it's already delivering everything we loved about Season 1, and I think a little bit more. What do you think, Nick?
There's lots more. And before we dive into all of those great things, we do want to give a quick warning. This is a full spoiler show. Mm-hmm. Nothing is held back. We're going to talk about everything that has dropped this week, and we might even speculate on what it means based on our Star Wars knowledge, the lore that exists. So if you're not caught up yet, here's what you want to do. Hit pause, come back when you're ready. We won't take it personal, and we'll be here when you get back.
We'll be here. We'll be here because each week on Road to Rebellion, we're unpacking the story, the characters, the big moments, the little details, and everything in between.
We're going to share our first impressions. We're going to dive deep into the themes that come up along the way, and maybe even point out a few things that didn't quite land for us. But as always, it's going to come from a place of love of Star Wars.
Absolutely. So let's not wait any longer, Nick. It's time to kick this off. Let's jump in with some of our first impressions. Well, Nick, to me, my very first impression overall is that it really felt like Star Wars is back. And that's not to say that Skeleton Crew or, Ahsoka or any of those other shows aren't Star Wars. But, man, this really felt cinematic and epic.
And that's exactly the word I was going to use. If we were playing the what's one word you would use to describe, these first 3 episodes, and I know it's going to continue throughout this whole series, is cinematic. It felt like, and honestly, it was a movie. It was 3 40 to 50 minute episodes that adds up to the amount of the movie. But it felt like a movie, and it felt like a Star Wars movie. It didn't feel like The Volume, which, The Volume has brought us a lot of really great things.
Yep.
But it just felt real and gritty, and like you said, like Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you just mentioned it, and it's really true. I liked watching it kind of as a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, and that's one thing that's really unique about it. At least these first 3 episodes, it was the same director for all 3, and it was the same writer. It was Tony Gilroy for all 3, and so you had that continuity. It really did feel like one movie.
It did, and it gave us. You could lock in. You could watch all 3 episodes if you binged it like we did. I don't have time to wait. I've got to just, I see the first one. I want to see the rest of them.
Right.
But it had the continuity. You had the little break in between. That was good for refilling your drink, going to the bathroom, whatever.
Right.
But if we had our wish, which you and I talk about all the time, if they had streamed this in a movie theater or shown it in a movie theater, I would have sat there and put off going to the bathroom so I could consume it and absorb it as that one big movie, because it had that feel, and it just, Star Wars, it felt epic. And that's the other word that you used. It felt epic. It felt fitting to the scale of Star Wars that has such a long history.
Well, and I think also, I wonder if, and now I'm going to have to try it, is like if you go straight from the end of one scene, somebody's going to put it up online this way into the next, if it really feels like that flow. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they're releasing it this way, because where they end, it feels like a natural end, but it's more like the natural end of a first act of a movie or a second act of a movie. So
a good classic 3-act stance. And it fits with what we know, each of the 3 episodes going through this 12 episode season is an arc, is a year of time. So it makes sense that they would plug them in and try to, have a fit that way.
Yep. And now, is it me, or does it feel like there was more action than most of season 1 of Andor? I felt like this was more, even though, you had the wedding scenes and stuff, which we'll talk about in detail, which were, that was very cool and intriguey, but if intriguey is a word, but it felt like when there was action, there was real action and more.
There really was. And it started off with, what we're going to talk about with the TIE fighter and, Cassian's kind of big escape, and it grows and it goes throughout. But you're right. Even in those wedding moments, like the wedding moments have a lot of motion to them. And there's dancing scenes that we're going to talk about. And I have some thoughts about those. But even that, like Andor season 1, which we adore and is so full of intrigue and is the Star Wars West Wing that I've always asked for, it is a lot of build up. It is a lot of dialogue and interplay to get us to where we are. And we get action towards the end and a couple little small bits. But this, and we kind of predicted this. This is action from the gate, from the very beginning.
Yeah, I feel like since it is broken up the way it is, everything's going to be based on a mission, a high impact mission. And the other thing that I felt is this felt like what was promised in the first season, which was kind of a spy story, kind of more intrigue. And again, so much of that happened on Chandrilla, just the little hallway conversations and the looks and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there were some things that I caught with Luthen that really showed me who he is and how he gets his information. So it was very interesting.
It is. And it's, season 1, again, not to rehash it too much. Season 1 set the table. Now it's time for us to not eat. It's time for us to feast. The table has been set and it's all in front of us. And it is all go, no quit, because there's 4 years in 4 3-episode arcs that we're about to jump into, because we know where it ends. We know it ends at Rogue One, and we know how action packed that is also from the gate. So this is that roller coaster. We're working our way up. We're well on our way to the top of that, right at the top of that, the crest of that hill. And it's time to hit the gas and go.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, let's take a few minutes and let's walk through what happened. Now, this was 3 episodes, as we said. This is like recapping a movie. This is recapping some of the details of a movie. We're not going to go into all the specifics, but we may end up just talking about them as a result. But let's just start by saying that these 3 episodes were all directed by Ariel Kleiman and were written by Tony Gilman. And Gilman, who the hell is Tony Gilman? He's his cousin. He's also his lawyer.
That's Regis's old producer, Gilman. Wait,
no, that's Tony Gilroy who wrote it, and it takes place exactly 1 year after the events of season 1, placing us firmly in BBY4. In fact, much like Andor, they put that up on the screen. Season 1, they put that right up on the screen. So this is 4 years before the Battle of Yavin. That means that the rebellion is still finding its footing and that the Empire is tightening its grip across the galaxy. So let's walk through that story in chronological order, and let's highlight some of the key moments and characters along the way.
So we begin at the Syonar Test Facility 73, and that's a name that we're certainly going to know and come back to talking about. Syonar, it's an imposing Imperial shipyard. It's here that we meet Imperial Inspector Naya, who is busy running checks on what appears to be a brand new, highly advanced TIE fighter. She meets with Cassian Andor, our hero, who is, with his trademark charm, flirting with her just enough to put her at ease. Yep. Once she leaves, he sneaks aboard this new TIE fighter. Right away, we see him struggle with the unfamiliar controls, and in a moment that adds a dash of humor, because even in Andor, there is some humor. Yep. He pushes forward on the yoke, only to have the ship jerk backward. Everything about this TIE is foreign to him, but he adapts quickly. Soon he's blasting out of the hangar with a TIE Advanced 1B on his tail. And what follows is a heart-pounding chase through a stony chasm that culminates in Cassian burying his pursuers in an avalanche and making a narrow escape. Pete, the action starts from the very beginning. It's, what grabbed you? Obviously, the backing into the wall, with the TIE fighter was funny. But, this, again, goes right to feeling like Star Wars. What were your initial impressions?
Yeah, there are a couple things that I recall that stuck with me. One of them was how stark white that was. That hangar was just, and it, brought me back to Narkina 5, right? Where the Imperial sort of starkness, the keep color and interest out of it, and I felt like that was great. The other thing that I was excited that we're starting with this TIE theft that we knew was coming, so I thought that was great. The other thing that stuck with me was the use of the word shit, which was such a it was a little bit of a controversy online when it happened in Ferrix, and it was great to hear Cassian say it. So you know what? Yep. That word is now it's right there with Karabast.
Double Star Wars canon.
It's Star Wars canon now. So
yeah, I agree, and you're right. The cleanliness of that hangar, something that stood out to me, and it's funny how different droids and different movies and shows and different things give off a different vibe. Like that black, kind of assistant droid that's rolling around. At one point, she puts like the data pad in the little holder on the side of it. Honestly, that droid to me gave the vibe of don't play around. Like that droid's going to snitch you out. That droid's like the little black BB-9E from Last Jedi, like ratting people out, highly alert, highly on the watch. So the fact that Cassian was able to get past that droid alone, was significant. Now, let me ask you this. In the conversations with Naya, the tech who is, running checks on the ship and everything, we're given the impression, or at least how I interpret it is, she's in on this, right?
Yes.
She, this is how much time I need. This is another person on the inside.
Yep.
But I do appreciate, and you kind of highlighted this as we were talking about this for the recap, she has this nervous moment of like, oh, I forgot. I was told I'm not supposed to look at you. Like, this is a very, you protect. It's like at the beginning of Dark Knight, the bank robbery, like you take out the next guy so they can't rat out, if they get captured or I don't know. I didn't see them.
Right.
Very finely tuned this heist, which we already know the rebellion has laid early, careful groundwork through Luthen, through this network of, what they're trying to get done. And I was really impressed that those little details were in there. But I love the humanity out of Cassian. He says, look, you've committed to this. You can ask me anything you want to. Like, we're in this together.
I think that's the one thing that I took out of this. And it almost is like a shift in Cassian a little bit, in that I don't see he's more caring, but he's certainly, because in the first season, he started out for himself. And by the time it came to the end, he was part of the rebellion, but just using, look, we know the ladies love Diego Luna, right? He's, and look, as a straight guy, he's an attractive male, right? And he's got a vibe about him, and he used it. And that's one of the things too, as sweet as it seemed, you got to remember he's doing it so he doesn't get caught. He's trying to make her comfortable so she doesn't freak out, so she doesn't feel like, oh, he's using me. And, long and the short of it is it worked, and it worked perfectly. So, and the problem is we don't know what happened to her, and hopefully we'll see her again in a future episode, but I don't have a good feeling for her about this one. So, well, next we go to a new planet called Meero, which we've never seen before. It's in the Outer Rim. And we shift gears to Bix, who is in the midst of a haunting dream about Lieutenant Gorst, who was the torturer who tormented her in season 1. She jolts awake to find Brasso and Talia, who's a new character, and Wilman Pack, who we met in Rogue One, Andor season 1, along with the ever loyal B2 Emo. It was a quick scene. It was, but it was enough to let you know that whatever that torture scene that we all were totally disturbed by, it stuck with her as well. So it worked from that perspective. But meanwhile, on Chandrilla, Mon Mothma is preparing for her daughter's wedding. And this is a high society affair with dignitaries from across the galaxy arriving in style. Mon, however, has more on her mind than just wedding details. Tay Kolma, her friend, we'll put that in air quotes, greets her saying he'd like to catch up with her, but she's very distracted quickly by the appearance of Luthen Rael, who's there at the behest of the father of her daughter's soon-to-be husband, Davos Skolden. Clea, Luthen's associate, is also at this reception and meets Luthen discreetly to share this intel that
Cassian,
the team at Sinar confirmed he got away clean.
that's it.
It was a pulse code, not a conversation.
We should have heard from him by now.
I can't transmit from here, Luthen. I told you when we landed. That's off the table. There's already a crowd at the docking platform. We're naked here. There's nowhere to hide a signal.
Keep listening.
Cassian has successfully fled Sinar, but his current whereabouts still are unclear. So the rebellion's wheels are turning behind the scenes, even at an event like this. Nick, do you immediately start to question Luthen if he's there with Skolden, or do you trust Luthen from what we know before? How did this impact your thoughts?
That's a very clever way for you to word that question, because we do know Luthen from season 1.
Right.
We know, driven goals, that monologue speech that he gives towards the end of season 1 just still is some of the best Star Wars writing that I've ever, heard performed. But I already come into this a little bit suspect. And I think, ultimately we're driving in the same direction, but I wonder if the differences in how we're going to get there are going to be some central themes throughout this second season. Mon Mothma, which we saw a lot of this in season 1. This is a person, and I think informs who we see Mon Mothma to be certainly farther down the line. The amount of things that she has to juggle in order to get ultimately the rebellion going and, successful, like a husband, a wedding, friends, in-laws, Luthen. There's a lot. This is so well acted by Genevieve O'Reilly, even just like the looks, the glances, all this chaos of this big celebratory event. But at the same time, like, her wheels are constantly turning, and I can't imagine, where they're going to take us with this. Well, back on Meero, we jump right back and forth, and we're going to get a lot of that throughout these episodes. Wilman and Bix are working when Bila, Wilman's girlfriend, strolls through the field to greet them. When she arrives, an Imperial ship appears in the atmosphere, casting a shadow over that peaceful setting. And at the same time, Cassian has landed on a forested planet yet to be named, and so looking for someone named Porco. The plan apparently is to trade the TIE fighter that he has stolen for his freighter, but when he lands, he finds Porco's freighter crash landed, leaving only a husk behind. As he explores, he is ambushed by a group of locals led by Gertis and Barty, two leaders who can't stop bickering over who's really in charge. I love how they set this up, because these are two starkly contrasting environments. You've got this farm-ish planet with, flowing, waving heads of wheat and silo-looking buildings. Everything's kind of calm. Everything seems to be relatively laid back until that, dominating ship shows up on the horizon. Yeah. And then you have Cassian landing in a dark forest in, wet, mucky, underground areas, and he's getting ambushed. What for you, stood out in this segment of the show, or this segment of this episode?
Well, two things. It took me to the second watch to realize that the guy he was looking for was named Porco, which I think is hilarious. And I also, because there's all these connections, and as we'll talk a little bit about later, where this might actually be taking place, I wonder if it is Porkins he was supposed to meet, because they didn't say he died, right? So maybe he was supposed to meet Porkins there. If your name is Porco and Porkins is a natural nickname, right?
I am thoroughly hoping that it is indeed Jack Porkins in the earlier days of his involvement in the rebellion.
That would be great. But I loved Gertis and Barty. I think I'm saying their names right, because I don't know if they really say them much on screen, because they are two different types of leaders, but very similar to the first season of Andor, the first couple episodes where it was children leading a group of sort of locals or warriors. this is the same thing. These guys seem very young, and just, I mean, the way that the ambush starts with him saying, "There's 15 guns pointed at your head." The other guy's like, "Did you have to tell him how many there are?"
Don't tell him that.
Right. So what it does is it sets up, first of all, a little bit of humor, a little bit of lightness, but the reality is these guys, I take these guys as really almost incredibly immature, even though they're not children. When we do finally see them, they're all adults, and some are older adults, but it's just interesting to watch it. And it did add a little bit of levity, and you get a nice little chuckle, which is that Star Wars thing, that tense moment and a chuckle that comes with it. So
yeah, it doesn't have to smack you in the face, which I think is very typically Star Wars. Like you're like, that's funny. Like these guys are arguing. Don't tell them how many guns there are.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So we then cut to a place called the Malthine Divide, which is a place we've never seen or even heard of, which is good because Krennic is holding a top secret meeting there with, among others, Dedra Meero and Major Partagaz from the ISB from season 1 of Andor. Krennic is there showing a retro style tourism video about Gorman, complete with 60s looking, characters walking through the streets and the music. And they tell us that Gorman is famous for its Gorman twill produced by Gorlectopods, which are these spiders that spin this very fine fiber. However, the real prize on Gorman, unknown to probably even the Gormans themselves, is calcite, which is essential for coating reactor lenses, which we as the audience recognize as the part of the Death Star project, which they did not mention at all in that room or that meeting. The Empire's plan is to mine Gorman, and in order to do that, it might cost the lives of the 800,000 people who live there. But Krennic and his cohorts, of course, deem that, hey, if that's necessary, it's necessary. And this group of people in this room, which is about a dozen folks, are there to plan for the potential outcome. Now, the Empire is also building an armory on Gorman's capital to sort of get their way in there. And Dedra suggests to Krennic that
You have a plan already. You had it before they finished speaking. I want your assessment.
Propaganda will only get you so far. You need a radical insurgency you can count on.
Count on for what?
You need Gorman rebels you can depend on to do the wrong thing. Director.
this reveals just the way Dedra thinks, and more importantly, how the Empire thinks. Nick, we knew Krennic was coming back. Did you expect to see him this quickly in the show?
I did not expect him to see this quickly in the show. And he delivered on every, other than not being on the screen long enough. Right. He delivered, and I loved the way they set this meeting up. You know, we got him speaking, and then you kind of pan down the table. You see Dedra, you see Major Partagaz, which I am ashamed to admit. It took me until watching these episodes to remember, oh, that's where I know him from. He was Qyburn in Game of Thrones, who was Cersei's like shady, you know, evil scientist guy that, you know, was her little right hand and did a bunch of stuff for her. And it clicked and I felt like an idiot. But I was glad to see him back because I do think he and Dedra bring a lot to, you know, this dynamic. And so it was great because they set this up basically with like, they bring in the PR team to go, hey, we're going to run this propaganda stuff. And this is how we're going to, you know, start doing what we're doing. And what I love so much about this, and you hinted at, is Dedra reveals who she is, because in a moment talking to Krennic, she's like, propaganda's not going to get the job done. Like, you need to be more ruthless in this. You need some insurgents who are going to do the wrong thing. Like, we need this to kind of, you know, give us a reason to squash someone. Give us a reason to go, yeah, we're coming in and taking over. Do this kind of 70s coup style. And it was a great, like you said, it was a great way to reveal, what's really going on behind it. At the same time, some of the people at this meeting are like eating from the hors d'oeuvres over at the side table while they're having these discussions. Right. Very corporate and in a very Imperial corporate kind of way. Yeah.
And I think you're right. And I think like as an experienced PR professional myself, I loved those two guys. And I also loved when Krennic, who's my favorite Star Wars character, as you know, in the Disney era, it's just like, all right, guys, we get it. We know what you're trying to do. We get it.
We get it.
But your point, I love the point that you make too, because it also happened on the on Aldhani, where you saw how callous the Empire is. Mm-hmm. They're sitting there eating these fine hors d'oeuvres. They're overweight. They're just like, yeah, well, we thought about doing a plague, but that's going to get out of hand. We can't do that. So just so callously talking about the deaths of, we might have to kill 800,000 people so that this project that we haven't named and most of the people in that room probably don't even know about can get done. And they're just like, okay, that's what the Empire wants. We're going to do it.
That's right. And if we will, before we move to the next section, if we want to check off another one on our list of Star Wars crossovers that maybe we didn't know we needed, I think this fits our Star Wars Mad Men crossover. They're pitching, they're showing the video, and eventually Don Draper just goes, you know what, that's enough, guys. We've got it from here.
Exactly.
So that was an excellent scene. As we continue to move forward, back on the forest planet that is yet to be named, Cassian recognizes the gang as the Maya Pai Brigade, or Pei. I don't know how we're pronouncing that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Which were Rebel supplied fighters. However, Gertis and Barty remain locked in a power struggle, and tensions escalate when, of course, as usual, one gang member shoots another. Cassian flees in the chaos, even though he is captured and brought to Porco's wrecked ship, while the others head for the TIE fighter. On Meero, B2 is worried about Cassian, which is very on brand for B2. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, Brasso learns that the Empire is conducting an audit that could endanger all of them. We jump back and forth between these these two locations to a third, and the wedding party is going on. And Mon Mothma learns from Tay that he and his wife have separated and that he is having financial struggles of his own. In the meantime, Perrin, Mon Mothma's husband, accuses her of having an affair with Tay. Clea informs Luthen that there is no contact from Cassian and that communications appear to have been disrupted on Meero. Pete, there's a lot in this segment. We go from three very stark, different environments. Yep. And I think the thing that is most telling, we get more of the humor from, just the gang that couldn't shoot straight and, in fact, shoot straight at each other. Then we have, Brasso, the Empire, is doing these audits, and they're worried because, of course, they're not there legally. They're going to want to know who's living in this little home and all that. But at the wedding party, which I feel like is kind of the meat of this section, is this interplay between Perrin and Tay and Mon Mothma. Yeah. Isn't he your lover? Let's not go there. There's a lot there. Unpack a little bit of what you saw in those interactions.
Well, I think it kind of confirmed what we knew from season one, is that whether she's having an affair with Tay or not, and she probably doesn't have time for it, to be honest.
Right.
Perrin doesn't care. Perrin is doing his thing, and I guarantee one of those women that was at the party is probably one of Perrin's girlfriends on the side.
That's right. Theirs is a marriage of convenience.
100%.
An arranged marriage of convenience at that.
Yes. And it just, there was also the scenes right before this where Perrin and Skolden are talking about Lita and saying, she's going to be a handful and, good luck. And is that boy ready for it? And, just kind of, they know what the parents were like of these kids and what they will or will not inherit. And to me, this is just sort of confirmation that Perrin and Mon are just together, just because, right. and she's clearly hated it from the beginning.
That's right. Well, and in the middle of this also, they're on the wedding hike. Vel reveals that she and Cinta have not been in contact. She tells Mon Mothma that, Luthen knows where she is, but won't tell her. Then we start to get what you're talking about with Luthen. We see those glances. He's watching Mon Mothma and Tay speaking. And what we get out of all of this is Tay feels undervalued. He's done a bunch of stuff to protect Mon Mothma and in the rebellion, to cover up some of her financial commitments, things that she's done. but in the process, he's lost his wife. His financial security has been jeopardized. So Luthen fears that Tay might turn to Davos Skulden, and that could jeopardize all of their positions. So this, the machinations are still at work. She's offering, I'm going to meet with you after this is over with. And in the meantime, Clea leaves to go back to the antiquity shop so that she can get back to some real legit communications, because she can't do it in the midst of everything that's going on at this party.
Yep. Yeah. It's, again, as we were saying before, it just feels like you have all the intrigue stuff going, and every look, every glance matters. I think one of my favorite parts of the scene, one of these wedding scenes, was Luthen in pure Luthen sort of disguise, talking to one of the parents of I guess he was one of the cadets at the Empire, and he said, and the kid says, "Oh, we just packed up everybody at some planet and we're going somewhere else." And Luthen's just like, "Oh, where are you going?" Just like kind of trying to always trying to collect intel, right? So but meanwhile, back on Coruscant, Dedra and Partagaz are walking into the ISB building, and she says, "I don't want the Gorman assignment," and he insists that it may feel like a demotion, but it's a gift that she should accept. And so she's kind of sort of torn as to what to do here. But then back on Mina Rao, Bila and Wilman watch as Imperial transports arrive in their sector. These sort of tanks that we saw again in Rogue One, greeted by the local lead farmer, a guy named Kellen. Lieutenant Kroll of the Empire takes a liking to Bix and invites her to dinner, but she declines, saying she's not sure her husband would approve. Question, Nick. Is did she marry Cassian, or is that just a ruse? Because
I think that's a ruse.
You think so? Okay. I thought so too, but I wasn't sure if maybe I could look more into it, but who knows?
Yeah, I think that's a smart move on her part to say, "Look, dirtbag, not interested."
Then back on that forest planet, the locals propose a challenge to each other because they're at they're at a standoff. Nobody's winning. They're just sort of, and they both are hungry and they're both wet and they're tired of the fight. So they propose a challenge, which we assume is going to be some sort of a blaster fight, but no, it's essentially space version of rock, paper, scissors to decide who's going to lead the group. So Cassian is left alone with one guard, and he of course knows Porco's ship, so he finds a hidden blaster that he had there. And then while they're out doing the rock, paper, scissors, one of the night monsters that they've heard throughout the day comes in and attacks. And in the confusion, Cassian is able to bolt for the TIE fighter. He takes off over what looks like the ancient temples of Yavin 4. Nick, is this on Yavin 4, do you think? I mean, it's the only planet they didn't give us the name for.
It is the only planet that was the immediate thought I had. And that's right there at the end of that episode, the ship's taking off. Of course, as soon as I saw the temple, I was like, "Oh, this makes sense. Like, it's jungle. It's going back to Legends. There's a lot of stuff in the Jedi Academy trilogy books where Luke, takes up trying to start the Jedi Academy in some of those temples, and it talks about the dangerous wildlife. And part of the reason they landed there was because that helped keep other people away. We see that in Rebels when they put up the bases with some of the creatures that it's a protection, even though it's dangerous. So it made a lot of sense. And I would at this point be a little bit surprised if that is not in fact
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And then a little bit later, at the beginning of the next episode, Cassian contacts Clea, admitting that the mission has been a problem. He says it's been upside down for 2 days. Mm-hmm. She mentions that there's a frequency blockade on Meero, and this freaks out Cassian because he knows that that's where his friends Bix and Brasso are. And so, unsure of what's really happening, he just cuts the call and heads off into deep space.
Yeah. If we don't have at the next Star Wars celebration an entire room dedicated to people who have already figured out the rules and playing space, rock, paper, scissors, I'll be utterly and completely surprised, because that's going to become the next thing. We're playing sabacc, we're playing space chess, like we're doing all the other things. This is the next Star Wars game that's going to become a real game. So yeah, definitely a very strong real world takeaway from that scene.
Yep.
So we move again, we jump back, we're changing locales, which I love about this show because it also just adds to the motion of the show. It doesn't feel like we're stuck anywhere for any period of time. And we end up on Coruscant, and in a surprising reveal, Dedra prepares for a dinner party while Syril fusses over table settings. They are a couple and living together in the galactic capital. That was a fun little reveal.
Yes.
And what I knew in the first part of this scene, before we get to the part that I'm about to mention, I knew where it was headed. As soon as they were like, we could pretend like you're not here, we don't have to do it, I immediately went, his mom's coming. Like,
I didn't pick that up. I
did immediately.
Really
I was like,
funny.
what would they not want to do? And I was like, his mom's coming. Yeah. So Syril's overbearing mother arrives as the dinner guest, embarrassing Syril and prying into Dedra's past after Syril excuses himself to do something very Syril, which is go lay on the bed in the dark by himself. Dedra lays the hammer down, and I love what this also again says about her.
You'll toughen him up.
I have a different plan in mind. But when I say the word plan, that makes it sound optional, which is not the impression you should be taking away. This game ends now. You want Syril in your life, you will think before you speak. I'll make sure he visits twice a month. I'll make sure that he calls you. I will guarantee a level of engagement, but it will be inversely proportional to the volume of anxiety you generate in our lives.
Quite a mouthful.
I'm not done. You can spare me the Uncle Harlow testimonials. I've had a look at his ISB criminal files, and that is not a story you want to be advertising.
She imposes strict rules on the relationship between Syril's mother and her son. We jump back to the wedding. Sculdun's gift, a significant Chandrillan statue, takes center stage. Tay watches and imparts to Mon Mothma that he thinks that he should speak up more and stand up for himself. At least that's what he feels anytime he meets with Sculdun. So we're feeding into this thing of like, is he going to sell us out? Is he going to burn us? Which is a fairly regular occurrence, which is a surprise to Mon Mothma. Oh, how regularly are you with him?
Right.
Surprised to learn this from Mon, Luthen warns her that she's vulnerable, easy for me to say, and still needs protection. She dismisses him. She's focusing on her public duties, but you can see under the surface, her situation is continuing to be in jeopardy. She thought she was safe. She thought the deal that she made with Tay, he was going to help kind of cleanse, in the first season, part of it was about Perrin's gambling debts and the things that she did to bail him out that could come back on her. So she's not safe yet. Then we jump back to Meero. Kellen gives Brasso papers to leave before the Empire arrives because they don't have papers. They're trying to figure out how we're going to get out of here. Bix and Brasso are ready to depart, but in a seemingly inappropriate moment, Willman has gone off with Bila. They need to get him as an Imperial TIE striker roars overhead. Lieutenant Kroll and his men return just as Cassian drops out of hyperspace above. Kroll makes an unwanted advance on Bix, and there's a fight. The arrival of Imperials prompts Willman to rush back. Star Destroyer looms overhead. Brasso is captured and Kellen's betrayal is exposed. As Kroll continues his unwanted advances, Bix murders him and another guard. Action, action, action. This is where we're picking up the pace. The Empire is here. They're asking too many questions. We don't have enough answers or the time to get out of here soon enough. I feel for poor Bix, man. She's been through it between the torture with Gorst and being attacked by this dirtbag of an Imperial. Like, this girl needs a vacation at that place where Cassian got arrested in season 1.
Well, honestly, it was a surprisingly vivid scene. It wasn't a graphic scene sexually, but it was vivid in just the way he would not stop pushing. And I'll tell you what, I would not be surprised if there's a trigger warning on this when it runs again, because it's really intense, and anybody who's been through anything like that could be, brought back to that moment.
Up some very difficult memories.
But again, you have Bix, who she's proving time and again how strong she is and what she's made of. And she does what she needs to do. She shoots him, and then another guard who shows up, she shoots that one too. So it was really intense, and I think it says a lot about how strong Bix really is, and how the Empire has scarred her. Now, this is twice, both through that torture scene and the torture of being assaulted for all intents and purposes by an Imperial officer. So,
yeah.
Well, Cassian arrives at the camp, and he's blasting Imperials from his ship, and he lands next to a wrecked speeder, only to find our first casualty of the season, Brasso, is dead. He was shot while trying to escape. Bix and Will reach the TIE fighter. Bix embraces Cassian, and as they're about to leave, she says, we need Brasso, and all he does is just shake his head and urges her to hurry up. And her and Will and Cassian take off out of the atmosphere. On Chandrilla, Tay leaves the festivities early with a substitute driver. He was expecting to meet his driver Otto, but who is it? None other than Cinta, who exchanges a knowing glance with Vel, who happened to be there when he left, and it sends Vel into some sort of emotional situation, because we see her next just sitting in a hallway in deep thought. Finally, we see a drunken Mon Mothma who's just been grabbing shots throughout the entire last 15 minutes of this episode, and she's just dancing wildly. She's she's fully in like this dizzying, desperate dance, clearly trying to forget all the problems that she's facing. And then it just cuts to black. Now, what I love about this, and I want to get some of your thoughts on this, is if this was a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, it could end there, right? You had most of your storylines, the main, there's no big questions left other than all the intrigue and all the espionage questions, and that's expected. But it just was really, it ended on a down note, which is kind of what this entire story is headed toward in a way. Positive for the rebellion, but negative for our characters here.
Yeah. And I think that this is the end of Tay. I think this was the knowing look. Luthen's like, there's a liability here, and Luthen doesn't play. Luthen doesn't play these. And I think Mon Mothma got drunk because she knew that too. Like, yes, she's dealing with a bunch of other things, but I think that for whatever the rumors or the assumptions was about her and Tay, there was an emotional connection there, even if it's an older one. The realization that in the midst of this rebellion, she is condemning another person to a fate that's not going to be positive. There's going to be more of that to come. It's a part of what war is. But I think this was the end for Tay, and I think Luthen's cutting vulnerabilities, and Mon Mothma knows it, and she has to deal, because she also has to still be the senator, and she still has to be the mother of the bride. And so she gets hammered and she dances it away because there's no other choice at this moment.
That's interesting. See, I didn't think that she knew. I was with you. I knew that, this is why they dropped that little subtle line that from Vel, that Luthen knows where Cinta is, but he doesn't tell me. So she's an agent waiting to do what she needs to do. But I'm going to take the other side of that with you, Nick, and I'm going to say that she doesn't know. And when Mon Mothma finds out, it's going to cause a rift between her and Luthen. So it's one of the, either way, it's still an interesting story, but it's cool that you got this is what's so great about the show is you can read into it different things, and that means that the espionage is working because they're not just printing it out and putting it on the screen for you. Here's what's going to happen next.
That's right.
You have to think about it and you put your own way toward it. So, but anything else on the end of the show? What were you surprised that Brasso went down?
I was not surprised. I was saddened because I do like that character. I think he brings such a good steadiness. He's a good anchor point for Bix, who he knows what she's been through, but it's not a romantic, it's a brother, sister, it's this family that we see with all of these characters having, spent this time together. And so you hate to lose any good character. And I thought he was a great character. And I'm always a fan of a good Star Wars character with a great beard. And Brasso definitely, rocked a good beard. So
he brought the beard.
Sad to see it, but we know that war comes with a cost. And we know that rebellion, there's going to be more of this as we go through. So it was kind of just a matter of who was going to be the first one.
And that's why I said that, like, he's, the first, because we know we're going to lose some other characters we love, because that's honestly, as sad and kind of morose as it is, that's what reinforces your commitment to the fight, is when you're losing those that you love. That kind of makes sure that you go there. So, well, let's take a break. And when we come back, we will take a deep dive into some of the themes and some of the characters, and also take a look at some of the lore connections that we saw in this episode.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, welcome back, Nick. To me, the theme of these first 3 episodes really was trust. Like, Bix and Brasso, they trusted that Cassian was going to come back for them. Brasso, to his own demise, ended up trusting Kellen. Mon Mothma has been trusting Tay, and what we have found that was a huge mistake. Even Luthen said, "We fail. That's our curse," which I thought was kind of, if I was to put one phrase to sort of cover this entire first arc, it would be that. The complete lack of trust was also at play among the Maya Pai Brigade, or Maya Pei, or however you say it. It led to their demise, right? And who knows what happened after Cassian took off with that monster running around. They may all be snack food at this point.
Yes.
And again, also that trust that Naya put in Cassian. I'm guessing she was an Imperial. I don't think she was a rebel plant. I think somehow they turned her, and she just put implicit trust in Cassian because of how he comes across and whatever. But the funny thing to me is that the only characters who trust no one and don't rely on trust as an important thing is the 2 most carefree in the show, and those are Perrin and Cassian. Perrin doesn't give a shit about anybody. Perrin is just, give me another wine, Sigourney Teva, and let's have some fun. And Cassian does care about trust, but he also doesn't trust that anybody can be trusted. So
Perrin doesn't care so much that he makes it the highlight platform of the toast he gives. He stands in the middle of the room. He's like, yeah, stuff's going to be rough and things are going to be bad, but you know what? Just deal with it. Find the joy, dance, drink, hang out, have a good time. It's fine. And we've seen that throughout, the first season of this show, in these first 3 episodes, where he's married to this very important woman, and he's literally like the real house husband of Chandrila, hanging out, going to get his toes done and making another drink while just going, yeah, whatever, not my problem, and that estate, my God, the Mothma estate is unbelievable, but but it is. He's so carefree and he's so just la-di-da. And it would be great if maybe down the line we find out like he's playing a game too. Like he is playing a little bit of a game. He's not an idiot. He's, talking about, hey, I heard you have a lover, and, clearly their paths, separated a long time ago. But it's also like, is he truly just this facile and empty-headed and doing his thing? Or is he going to pop up later on down the road and throw another wrench into this works too? I don't know, but I'm intrigued to find out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he ends up having a heart at the end. There's two ways he goes, right? Either we don't see him much again. So there's three ways. Either we don't see him much again because he's just, to your point, kind of just a paper thin sort of character, or one of two things happens. Either he finds his heart at the end because he has to save his daughter or something, or he turns as dark as you can get and just be like, you know what? I've been bowled over by my wife my entire life and I've had it. I'm going to take her down. And I don't see that happening either. I think if anything, he's going to find a heart, but I'm not putting much weight in that. So.
Yeah. 100%. And Cassian, like you said, Cassian is set up to not trust. He, from being a little child to going through every different phase of life and thing he's been through, and what we're going to ultimately see at the beginning of Rogue One. Like, it's about the mission. It's about keeping it going. So, the trust that Cassian has is for the people who have been the closest to him, which has been Bix and Brasso. And that's why in that scene, when she says there's a blackout, he was like, well, those are my only people. Yeah, that's where I'm going.
I'm going there for sure. Yeah. Nick, I'm going to throw you sort of a curveball here, and I'm going to do it this way. When we talk about characters, let's say, who is your MVP character of this episode? And I'll start so you can kind of get where I'm going with this. I'm going to go with Mon Mothma. Because, her tragedy started last season, and it just became harder and harder to watch just as these 3 episodes came on. She realizes, some of the stuff that I kind of blew off when I watched it a second time, I found myself being more pulled into it. The conversation she was having with her daughter, she has realized that she's now sacrificed so much. She's sacrificing her position. She's sacrificing Tay. She is, most importantly, she sacrificed her daughter. And what's happening is she's starting to realize that this may be for absolutely nothing. Because if Tay is going to Skulden, then all the work she did is really for nothing. And that to me is what I got out of the end of the episode, is that she's drinking heavily. She's just giving herself over to the party because it feels to me like this is the last time that she will ever feel joy, but she can't even really enjoy it at that. But she's like we've been at that situation when you're at a college party and you're mad at your girlfriend and you're like, I'm just going to drink. And you think you're having fun, but you're actually, it's pulling you deeper into the thing that's got you so upset. And so to me, she's the MVP of these 3 episodes.
Well, and you also see what we don't get very much of from Mon Mothma, because everything has to be a front.
Yeah.
She has that human moment where she tells her daughter, look, we don't have to do this. Like, you can tell the guilt has overwhelmed her. And for that moment, she says, look, we'll go out there. They'll have had a great afternoon. Everybody will be fine. You don't have to do this. And when the daughter pushes back, then she's done. And she immediately snaps into Mothma mode. And she goes, you walk behind me. And so, that shield goes right back up. That temporary, little bit of humanity that shows through, she shoved it back down and went, okay, this is what we're doing. And she goes with it. That's an excellent choice. And I would have chosen that one, but since I can't, because you already did. And for the sake of conversation, my other MVP, I think, would be Dedra.
Okay.
Because, one, like you, I had no idea that she and Syril were going to end up being a couple. That's
Right.
very funny to me. And, you know, even when he's kind of trying to do his little, you know, alpha boss mode and he's introducing the new guy in the office, walking down the thing and he catches him looking away and he snaps at him like, yeah, I was like you and now look at me. And, you know, but Dedra's driving, but I'm very, very much intrigued with the seeds they're planting for what is going to happen with her going forward. This conversation with Krennic, what she says to Partagaz. And I love how he says, you know, you did this wrong. He was like, don't make the person famous and then not be able to catch them and then make them famous. Like there's a way to do this that's going to build your power and esteem and the myth of who you are. But they are setting her up as someone to go, don't play propaganda games, get right to it, squash some people, turn people against each other. So, and even with Syril's mom, she's like, I have a different, she said, I have a different plan for him. Like there's a purpose. I'm not entirely convinced that this is a truly actual romantic relationship. There's something that he can do or knows that is going to be beneficial to her as well. And so she's playing a much longer game, and I'm very intrigued by how that's going to continue to play out.
Well, and that's an interesting thing too, is we were like you, we were both surprised, and I loved it. I actually kind of laughed a little bit when I realized they were together, because creepy Syril wanted that from day one. Right. He got it. It's kind of funny. But one of the things that I'm trying to figure out what her game is with him. And gosh, I would love it if she just, you know, is actually she's got a soft spot, or she's a human being on the inside. But I don't know. I if anything, maybe the relationship with Syril will make her vulnerable to make mistakes. You know, that could end up being the problem for her as well. But now let's just take a couple minutes. Let's talk a little bit about if you have any critiques or nitpicks, anything with the show. Like, to me, there's only really two things that I can find with these episodes. One was, you know, from a purely special effects standpoint, when the shuttle with Tay at the end, it just didn't look quite finished to me. And I know that's a super nitpick, but it just didn't look quite right. And the other thing is, I mean, did you catch that, or am I just I might be just.
So I did, but I kind of thought that was intentional, because this whole kind of the mystery around, oh, it's a different driver, it's not the person he expected to come pick him up.
Right.
I honestly thought we were going to like see that shuttle blow up as it flew away. Like, again, building into this Taze getting taken out, because there was a comment that was made about the shuttle. And so I kind of thought that had an intention, like that long shot looking over the nose of it right before they took off. Like there was just a part of me that thought, oh, this is intentional. Like, we're supposed to think something's wrong with this. And maybe that's how we're going to get in the opening to one, you know, or the story is going to flash back to, oh, it blew up just over the ridge. And so we're going, okay, that's why it felt weird. So maybe that's a seed that was planted that is yet to be harvested. Yeah, it did stand out.
It's an interesting point, because as we know, or we've been told, these episodes take place over a year. So the next one is, and this was only over a couple days. If you track it from what Cassian said, he was at the Yavin 4 site 3 days before. And then, so this is like a 5-day period max, right? The wedding weekend and everything. So if she does take out Tay, is it just going to be something we're going to hear? Or, you know, I don't know how they're going to make that connection, but either way, yeah, I mean, and so that kind of makes me feel better about what you're saying there. Is this is, you know, maybe they will make some sort of comment that, you know, Tay's shuttle crashed leaving the wedding, and we just don't see it. The second nitpick, and again, super nitpick, and I even hate saying this because I would probably mock somebody if they said this on Twitter, so I'll be watching Twitter and looking for people saying this. We don't know what that mission was about, which is kind of cool, kind of very Star Wars-y to drop you right into the middle of the TIE fighter mission. But man, why didn't the Empire make more of them? Those were some freaking powerful ships. They were
seating for multiple people, like they were bigger, like 4 or 5 people sitting around the inside of that thing.
Yeah. The weapon system on it was insane. So,
I think this was just to show us Cassian's working. Cassian's out there. Like, we wrap up season 1 and it's time to go. Now he's in it. He's in a costume. He's undercover.
Right.
And this is just to say he's doing high stakes stuff. He's not playing little kid ball. I think that's what the point of that was.
Cool. Yeah, I'll buy that, and I'll be totally happy with it because it's. So, the next segment is we want to talk a little bit about some lore connections that we saw. We look, if you're looking for a show that's looking for Easter eggs, go to our friends over at Screen Crush. They're going to give you every Easter egg, every little thing that showed up in the background that we're not going to pick up. These are some things that to me and to Nick are bigger lore sort of connections and fun things to pick up on. The first is Erskine. If you remember the guy who was telling Mon Mothma about the senator or the governor whose ship was too big to land on the landing platform. He is, I believe, more than likely Erskine Samaj, who appeared in the Rebels episode Secret Cargo with Mon Mothma, where he's her senatorial attaché. So I think that's kind of a cool connection. And it gives me, a lot of hope and faith in the storytelling, and that there those kind of little details. I don't see Tony Gilroy watching episodes of Rebels, but I do see him at least being open enough to talk to the story group and go, what is there somebody who should be her assistant, or somebody in the story group reading the thing and say, let's not make his name Santo, let's make his name Erskine, and he'll be the guy from the thing, and we'll just we'll get an actor with dark hair and it'll match. Okay, cool, good. All right, moving on.
Absolutely. So, and it works that it's story related because Erskine Samaj is a Tuckerization of the name James Erskine, who was a story editor at Lucasfilm. And that's where that name came from. George Lucas very notoriously would take names and flip them around. So obviously, if you see Samaj, that is the word James backwards. And then Erskine, his name was Erskine, just with an E at the end of it. So
I didn't even pick that one up. That's great.
Yep, there you go. And he was voiced by actor Josh Brenner in Star Wars Rebels.
Oh, okay, cool. Love that. We went over the Yavin 4 one, so we don't need to go over that one again. You may have missed this. You may have picked it up. When Bix is trying to reach Cassian on the communications device, you can see a little picture of Marva, Cassian's late mother, hanging on the wall right next to the machine. And the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is, did you catch any other Easter eggs or anything?
Not really. In Luthen's shop, and I couldn't remember if we saw these in season 1, but we see the headdress that looks like the one that Queen Amidala wears.
Yeah. Yep.
And then also the Plo Koon mask is right there where she pops out the little secret panel to push the button.
Right.
I was zoned in on the shop because I know that's a good place for them to bury some of those things. Yeah. There was the snake, the teal looking snake thing that I can't remember where I've seen that before. But I'm sure it'll pop up, soon enough online.
Yeah.
I didn't see any Indiana Jones things this time, but I'm sure we'll get another shot of those later.
I was looking. I'm sure the compass is going to be in there this time around. Probably got to be. But I want to talk a little bit about Gorman, and this may be a spoiler for future episodes. So if you don't know what Gorman is and you don't want to know, skip ahead a little bit in our podcast here. Because for those that watch Star Wars Rebels, in the episode called Secret Cargo, Chopper plays a transmission reporting that Senator Mon Mothma has stunned the Imperial Senate with her, quote, treasonous comments about Emperor Palpatine. The Rebels watch as Mon Mothma delivers a powerful speech accusing the Emperor of orchestrating the brutal assault on the people of Gorman. It's come to be known as the Gorman Massacre. And she says, the Gorman Massacre is clear evidence that Palpatine is a ruthless executioner who has used the promise of security to justify his tyranny across the galaxy. Now, also, in addition to that, showrunner Tony Gilroy has explained in an interview that the event, which unfolds over 5 episodes of the series, now I'm wondering if he counts episode 1 as one of those 5 episodes where they talk about Gorman, he says that this will straighten out that story since there's been a lot of confusion within canon about the Gorman Massacre. So again, we are probably going to see the Gorman Massacre in the series, and I mean, it makes sense. And to me, again, what I love is this sort of lore stuff, and in a way, I have to take back what I said about Tony Gilroy not maybe knowing, but I'm sure what happened. Here's my guess. Tony Gilroy was like, I want to do this thing that sets Mon Mothma up and sets her off, and Pablo is across the table going, let's do the Gorman massacre.
Right.
So, but there's also that transmission from Chopper, and we do get to see some of that in animation. You think we're going to see a live action version of something from animation? Do you think we're going to see her give that speech?
I would love to see that speech. And I think there's a very strong possibility that there could be a crossover there. And I think that it's interesting that Gilroy says, straighten out the story. Yep. We've gotten a couple of these other ones. We've got Night of 1,000 Tears. We see that, on Mandalore. Yep. It makes sense that they would do something like this. But as I was reading up and remembering about Gorman, there's a couple of different versions of this, either from some of the books. In one of the versions, I believe it is Tarkin's shuttle literally just lands on a group of protesters and crushes them to death. Yep. So I don't think we'll probably get quite that version of it, but we also did get that recreation of Night of 1,000 Tears, which in that felt very like Terminator with the Terminator robots. But I don't know. I think that it's very possible that we will get, obviously we're going to get a strong connection to that because that's going to be a big turning point for Mon Mothma. I'm just curious to see how they're going to let it play out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Road to Rebellion, the Andor Aftershow. Thanks so much for joining us as we break down this incredible season of Andor.
Well, Pete, we are just getting started, and we will be back next week covering the next 3 episodes as we continue to follow Cassian's journey and as we see how the rebellion that we all know and love really begins to take shape.
And if you're enjoying this show, well, make sure you're subscribed to Around the Galaxy wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, this is just one of the shows across the SSW network.
Yes, that's right. And in addition to the Around the Galaxy podcast, you can join us live every Thursday night on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the SSW Network. If you can't remember all that, just search the SSW Network on YouTube. It'll get you there. And you will find all the Star Wars news of the week, celebrity interviews, and live calls and chats.
And if you want to support what we do, head on over to patreon.com/the SSW Network. You'll get early access, you'll get exclusive content, and you'll get a chance to be part of the best Star Wars community that there is.
And of course, if you like today's show or any of our other podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review, share it with your Star Wars friends, and tell us what you thought about Andor this week. You can find us on all social media outlets at the SSW Network, or go to our voicemail line, 504-321-1501, and leave us a message. We are always up for talking Star Wars.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and until next time, may the Force be with you.
And this is the Road to Rebellion. See you next week.
Road to Rebellion is copyright 2025 Pete in the Seat Studios. For more information on this show and other shows in the SSW Network, please head over to the sswnetwork.com. Audio clips are copyright 2025 Lucasfilm.
It's the big Circle K giveaway, where every visit to Circle K is a chance to win $100,000. You heard that right, $100,000. Visit Circle K today for your chance to win. No purchase necessary. Visit CircleK.com for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.